I was handed a microphone, but at LkldNow we believe in sharing, and so I am glad that I get to share Barry's microphone. We won't always know whose lives we touch and make better for or having care, because actions can sometimes have unforeseen ramifications. What's important is that we do care and we do act. Words penned by Charlotte Lunsford Berry, known as America's volunteer. She's worked in several volunteer committees in nonprofit organizations for years and for the Salvation Army. I'm Andrea Oliver, and tonight it is my distinct privilege to serve as your moderator for this event. I want to share with you that we've amassed a talent of very engaged panelists that charge with the discussion at hand. We hope you will leave tonight with a strong sense of caring and a call to action. It is my belief, as Marian Wright Engleman said, you really can change the world if you care enough. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce our panelists for tonight. Before I do, a reminder, as Barry says, that the purpose of the Homeless Coalition of Polk County, part sponsors of this event, is to work to prevent and end homelessness in Polk County. I hope as you leave tonight, you will be thinking about the part you play in this particular issue and what you might do to assist the homeless in our community. Probably a man that needs no introduction to this audience. I'd like to start with our esteemed mayor, Bill Mutz. He's serving his second term as mayor of Lakeland, a community he has served since he moved here in the mid-90s. I think it's about that time I met you as well, Bill, and your beautiful wife, Pam. Mayor Mutz and his wife, as we mentioned, they've been married 44 years and are parents of 12 children. In civic roles, Bill has served on 21 not-for-profit or business boards. See, that's the kind of man he is. That is the kind of man we're talking about. He's founding member of Grace City Church. Bill has a passion for seeing successful life change in marriages and parenting. His foundational human relations goal is to strive to honor everyone. He believes when this is accomplished, that motivated people can engage in thriving environments where hopes and dreams maximize human potential. We'd like to introduce Bridget Engleman, who is sitting to my right. Wait for the audience, Bridget. She is the executive director at the Homeless Coalition of Polk County. Prior to working at HCPC, Bridget worked in local government for 23 years, managing the Community Development Block Grant and the Emergency Shelter Grant. Then moving to my left and seated beside Mayor Mutz, Dr. Brenda Reddout. Brenda, are you going to wave? Yes, Brenda is the executive director of the Talbot House Ministry. She's actively engaged in the community, having served as president of Polk, a board member of UWCF, a member of the Institutional Review Board of Winter Haven Hospital, a former school board member, which is exactly where I met you many years ago. Brenda has served on multiple civic and other organizations. And then tonight I'd like to introduce you to Erica. There she is, and a powerful story that she's going to be sharing not too long from now. Erica says her superpower is love. And couldn't we all do a little bit more of that? I hope you didn't watch the Oscars on Sunday, but we could use some more love, yes? Her life was filled with trauma from a very early age. Still, she has survived. And now she tells her story in hopes that it will help others struggling not to lose themselves. Everything she does with a spirit of acceptance, a spirit of gratefulness, and with humility. Megan Petersen, there she is the primary prevention advocate at Peace River Center Victim Services. Recently, she's been providing Lakeland Police Department with training on best practices when responding to domestic violence calls. And then I'd like to introduce you to Barbara. Barbara also has a story that she'll be sharing tonight, and I have to thank the organizers who put this event together for allowing us in real time and in real person to meet these wonderful ladies who will be sharing about their experiences, because it's one thing to hear a story, it's one thing to hear somebody's story, it's another thing to be able to be there and embrace and hear the journey from the individuals who've been there. And I think that's what we would like to do. And last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to Ben Ruch. Ben oversees the Homeless Education Program, the Health Project at Polk County Public Schools. Prior to this position, Ben was the director of the Emergency Family Shelter for the Salvation Army. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would at this time, just put your hands together and let us Mayor Mutz, yes, sir, I am going to start with you. I am going to start with you. What is local government in Lakeland and Polk County doing well, and what more should they be doing in responding to the issue of homelessness? I think that Mark.
Well, I think for the last almost 20 years, we have worked on this effort within the city and the county on an increasing basis, and are constantly trying to peel off the edges. But this is an issue, as you know, that has 60 fixes, not one fix or two fixes regarding it. And so the most profound, quantifiable thing we have done recently is providing more housing capacity, which is what we must do in order to be able to solve the problem. And of course, this is like dominoes. It is not just housing capacity for the homeless, it's housing capacity for the workforce, it's housing capacity for millennials and apartments, it's housing capacity for market rate apartments and market rate housing. And so all of those things have to work together for us to have the kind of capacity, and the not-for-profit organizations that have been in this community as well as throughout the county that are supportive of homeless embracement and correction and equipping have been marvelous over the years. And so the homeless, one of the terms on this is that we fix this forever. We'll never fix this forever because we're always going to have some population that remains homeless, some people like being homeless. But our goal is to minimize that, and certainly to equip people to be able to find life stability where we can make it work for all parties involved. I think the biggest gain we have seen recently is that we have become serious, the homeless providers, to affordable housing providers, about our desire to have investments made by them and helping align through those organizations to be able to get people homes.
I want to the microphone because I would like to maybe have the same question that we heard from local government, but I'd like to have Bridget, who is the executive director of the Homeless Coalition of Polk, address the very same question from your perspective. What is local government in doing, you think, and are they doing enough when it comes to the issue of homelessness? As you answer, also be considering what they could be doing or how they could be doing that better.
Well, I'd like to go ahead first and say Lakeland, the city of Lakeland and Polk County in the whole have been doing a lot for homelessness. They get an allocation from HUD and some actually get an allocation from state, and a percentage of that money actually goes into the COC and agencies that are providing services. We are providing more housing units based on those grants. And so more units mean more housing for not only just homeless, but for individuals like Mayor Mutz had said, the workforce. In today's economy, it's tough out there for just anybody. the cost of living has increased, and as you know, the city of Lakeland is growing faster than Superman can fly, to be honest with you. There is no affordable housing out there, so that is key to make this successful, is more affordable housing. And I know that the city of Lakeland has just put out an RFA for a developer to come in and build more affordable housing, and the same as Polk County. So we are putting that money back into the community, but what we need more of are local officials to be educated on homelessness, and to have business owners to have buy-in as well in our community. Because together we can make things happen, and like we said, we're not going to end homelessness, but we can minimize homelessness.
I mentioned that if you are following the program, we had dedicated a little bit of time for our panelists to tell you some more about themselves. The consensus was that they wanted to jump right into the question. But as we move to the next question, and I'm going to pose this to you, Dr. Reddout, you work daily in an area where you are privy to the homeless. And so, as you share a little bit about what you do at the Talbot House and about that particular ministry, I would also like you to address the issue of who is the most vulnerable, who is experiencing homelessness, and how is that affecting the ability to respond.
Okay, that's a lot of questions. As Bill and Bridget were speaking, I was thinking about the movie. I listened, but I was thinking about the movie Schindler's List. And if you remember in Schindler's List, he said that he could only take a certain amount, and they kept coming, and they kept coming, and they kept coming. And that's the way I feel about homelessness in Polk County. They keep coming, they keep coming, they keep coming. Now, who keeps coming? Many of the people we see at Talbot House, and we say and offer, we offer, and we do a wide range of services. But we serve, and Steve is here, I saw him there, my brother, from Liaison. We serve a very complex and fragile population. We talk about rapid rehousing, putting people into an apartment or a home, but we don't look at how complex and fragile their needs are. We have people who are addicted to substances. We have people who have severe psychosis, other kind of mental health issues. We have people who are dropped off by family members because they've begun to show signs of dementia, or they're a bit unruly as a teenager. We get referrals from time to time from the Heart Project at Polk County School District. And I gotta tell you, a homeless shelter is no place for an 18-year-old kid. We get people who are prey on the streets. We get people who pray on the streets. So it's difficult to say who are the homeless, because you can't just paint a picture of one person and label that, paint the broad brush and say that's who the homeless are. Which is why we offer differentiated services and individual services. Erica is a success because she worked the work and was committed to improving her life. But so many of the people that we see, no matter how hard they work, they're not going to improve their lives because the mental illness has taken over. I see people that I work with here nodding their heads. We see it every single day. And that's not to say, okay, so that's the sad part, okay? But that's also the part that should give hope. Because if we can reach one at a time, then we have had success, and that's what we try to do every single day.
Thank you so very much. Megan Petersen is the primary prevention advocate at the Peace River Victim Services. And as Dr. Reddout was sharing, there are so many people that are coming into a program that really, that is not the place for them. And so I'm thinking that the Peace River Victim Services area, that you are probably seeing a lot of people walking into where you are and where you serve, and possibly some homelessness. What are the greatest or most common misconceptions you find, or that's about about the homeless?
Well, I think it's obviously a very complicated issue. As you mentioned, you can't describe the entire population of people experiencing homelessness. It's impossible. They're individuals, they have individual needs. And it's to the point that every single person who has come across this issue in their life needs a specific plan that works for them. And more than tangible services, they need encouragement, they need people to believe in them, and that's what's exciting about this. This is a solution-oriented panel, and so while it can definitely feel like this is an unsolvable issue, the benefit of working in the nonprofit sector is we're not allowed to say that. All issues are solvable. So I work with domestic violence and sexual violence survivors. A huge population of women who experience homelessness, and men too, although to a slightly lesser degree, they experience homelessness because they're escaping abuse. And I come across a lot of people who don't understand how people do this work, how people stay in this work. Because a person leaving an abusive relationship, they attempt to leave and make contact with an emergency worker 7 times before they successfully leave an abusive relationship. That is really hard to understand for people who've had the privilege not to experience that. However, there's a lot more than just a person wanting to stay or refusing to leave. And so I think that's a huge misconception that people enjoy these relationships or this environment, or that they're not willing to put the work in. They're overcoming so much trauma, so much red tape. I mean, we wish we could house everybody the minute that they call, but we have waiting lists. We have lack of resources, we have burnout, we have understaffing. And when it's already so hard to take the step forward and say, I need help, and then you come across miles of red tape, and you come across workers who have too many clients per person, it can be really difficult. So I think a major misconception is that people don't want to help themselves. They absolutely do. They just need a lot of support while they're doing that, because it's a really, really hard task. I would say another misconception specifically to people experiencing homelessness, we often picture people experiencing substance abuse issues, and we're told, don't hand them $5 because you can't account for what they're going to do with that. That is not our population of people experiencing homelessness. Our population of people experiencing homelessness are veterans and single mothers and people who really want to have a house and they actually have a full-time job, but they don't make a living wage, so they cannot house themselves. Because currently our landlords are asking 3 times of an income that's actually necessary to pay rent. So I would say the major misconception that can be definitely looked at more specifically in different ways would be that people don't want to help themselves, or they're not willing, or they're not cooperative. They just need a lot of support, a lot of understanding, and a lot of individual working with.
Thank you so very much. I'd like to come back to you, Bridget, because here you are, you're working in this organization who's tasked with helping the homeless in our area. And I'm sure as you go about talking about the work you do, sharing with various organizations, that possibly some of the things that we just heard, the misconceptions about why people are in the position they are and that they do not want to help themselves, probably you are hearing some of the very same thing. How do you address that? How do you address these misconceptions?
What we're doing here today, educating each and every one of you. The misconception is exactly what what you just said, and just to let you know that majority of people that are here right now may already know somebody that's just one step away from being homeless. You are at risk of being homeless. It's a medical emergency can make you homeless. But the sole provider, a death of a sole provider can make a family homeless. So the misconception is that it's just the people out on the park benches asking for money. No, it's your neighbors that may be losing their home. And the wages that we have are not high enough to actually afford the housing that we have here in Polk County. The area median income for 80%, I think they would have to have an average apartment, 2-bedroom apartment is $1,200. That's more than 40% of their income going into their housing. So they have a family, they have medicine, and they have to, what are they going to choose? Housing or medicine? So it's not just the people you see out on the street. It could be your church member. It could be your neighbor sitting right next to you. You just don't know.
Exactly. Ben, I'm going to come over to you again. I would love to possibly ask Erica to share a little bit of our story after Ben speaks. So Ben, I know you're in our Polk County schools. You are doing homeless education programs, and I can't imagine the information that you have to disseminate to the students, how you are sharing that information, what it is that you are sharing. So if you would, tell us a little bit about that. And I'd like to, as you respond, also talk to us a little bit about from the student's perspective, what are some of the things you hear as you go in and work with these young people?
Sure. So 3,800 students. That's about how many students we've identified per school year the last 2 school years. As of this morning, 3,583 students experiencing homelessness. That is about nearly 400 more students right now than where we were this time last year. The HEART project is the homeless education program for Polk County Public Schools. And, so many people up here do such amazing things, and it truly does take a team. The part of this process that myself and my team really address is the education. We see these students' education as the best chance that they have to end the cycle that they're in. So myself and my team provide the supports needed year in and year out as needed to make sure that these students have that support to have academic success. In regards to what that may look like from a student's perspective, and it's tough. If you could put yourself in the position of a student who is waking up at one of these budget motels we have, and mom and dad are talking about the fact that, I don't think we have enough money to stay here tonight, and you're a child hearing this, you're essentially going to school with the idea in your head, you have no idea where you're going to go to bed that night. So imagine, school's hard enough for our young folks, but imagine having to start your school day worrying about where you're going to sleep, or even going to school and on an empty stomach. We have a lot of unique needs, as many of my counterparts up here know. We have a lot of unique needs, and that's why it is not a one-size-fits-all solution. But we just need to talk with our families and get an understanding of what unique needs they have so that we can address them through our program, and then get them connected with some of these folks up here so that they can get assistance with some of the other things that they're needing that we can't help with.
Many of us in this room, we got to have a dinner at night, and we had somewhere to lay our head, and I would dare say there were folks in this room who possibly struggled with the curriculum and struggled with other things. I cannot imagine the sense of hopelessness that a student might face, knowing that, just as you shared, they have nowhere to sleep tonight and they're not entirely sure where they might be eating. How do you keep that student focused on academics, focused on striving and doing well when there are these very present dangers that they face?
So I can tell you that I honestly, as much as I'd like to take credit for that, I know myself and my team do a great job working with the parents, but it's people like Stacy Weaver, who's a school counselor back there, the ones in the trenches that are truly helping these students. And as far as that day-to-day and making them feel supported in the classrooms. I mean, we'll work with the parents. Maddie Lina, who works in my office, works with unaccompanied high school youth. And we try to get an understanding of what those needs are so we can address it, whether it's tutoring, whether it's getting them connected with Central Florida Healthcare to get a medical issue resolved, getting access to other type of resources. But on a day-to-day basis, it's people like Stacy and other advocates in our schools that are really doing the heavy lifting.
And we really appreciate the work that you're doing. We promised you that we would have some individuals share their story, and I think now might be a fitting time to introduce to this audience Erica.
Okay, I'm going to start when I was 13 years old and I was sexually abused by a family member. So I ran away from home. I've been homeless off and on ever since I was 13 years old. I suffer from mental illnesses, which I take medicine for now. I went through plenty of programs. I got help when I needed it. And I'm living my life right now, being sober and clean and just dealing with life's, what life throws at you. And I'm grateful for Peace River and Gospel Inc. with the Tavern House. They've all helped me when I needed help, and I want to say thank you for that. And I'm a little nervous, so you gotta forgive me.
You're doing great.
But right now, I'm doing well, and I'm doing everything that I can to have a good life, and I'm gonna have a good life with help when I'm met. And I just want to say thank you for that.
Erica, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'd like to, you called out some groups that you said were very helpful to you and you thanked these individuals. But I can imagine that as you dealt with some of your own personal struggles, you might have felt like you were not getting the assistance that you needed, and how can we be more sensitive? How can we as a society, we as a city, how can we be more sensitive, be more helpful? What do we need to know?
Just to go to the right people. Make sure that you're not going to someone that say they're going to help you and they're not. And just find help. Find help.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Right, thank you.
So, panelists, there's been a surge in apartments that are either planned or under construction. Will this help increase the supply of affordable housing? We heard a number of the panelists talking about affordable housing, and we know the rates in so many areas are skyrocketing, and we're feeling the effects here in our beautiful city. So will this help increase the supply of affordable housing, or will it just end up, Mayor Mutz, as high-end units out of reach for the average Lakelander? Oh, you gave away your microphone, Mayor Mutz.
I didn't know it was mine.
No, thank you for sharing.
The key is that we build enough units, and we can't allow, this is supply and demand, so we have to have market price units for homes, market price apartments for people who want to pay and be in those, either one of those living scenarios, and then underneath that, enough workforce housing neighborhoods and enough affordable housing neighborhoods to be able to do that. We can't do a little, we have to do a lot, and we have to make them around the city. And so we really are probably somewhere in the region of about 5,000 residencies short in our city. So this is no little game that we have to have, and especially adding to the growth that is here. So we're being aggressive as possible in this, and alongside it, we have to provide public services for those things. You have to make sure that we have adequate amount of fire protection, adequate amount of police protection as we grow as a city. So we are not on one of these right now. We are on one of these kinds of curves. And so doing it as a smart city, which will feature very review with your next session in October. Well, smart growth is essential, and we work diligently to try and attract a variety of providers so that we don't align only with one or two, and a variety of types of housing and in a variety of areas with enough green space so that we're doing this in a wise way on a long-term basis. But it's essential what this footprint looks like today to provide enough affordable housing underneath it, but it takes all elements of that to be built.
You talked about, don't pass the microphone. You talked about being at this point in I guess, the curve. As we're heading this way, what will the success look like, especially in regards to the issue?
We don't have room for that way in our church, okay? So I think what it looks like is that we get to 2045, and we're probably about 500,000 people here, and that's about where we will probably start to go a little flatter in the process of growth, but who knows, because Central Florida's growth is not going to abate in the next decade. It's just, there's too many positive things about living in Florida, and there's too many positive things about Central Florida, and Central Florida middle is where we have the opportunity to grow the most affordably. So even though our rates in this market are high, they're still much more affordable than Tampa or Orlando. We just forget about that because we relate to our own pricing and our own housing rates. We will continue to be an affordable place to live, relatively speaking. But what drives our prices up is the lack of housing. Totally. We've got to have enough housing to make this work. And we're going to need a lot of support community-wide while we do this, because we're going to be putting housing in areas where there's been green fields. And what we compare to is not the traffic that's going to come from the green field, but the traffic that's going to come from anything that is built there. And so work alongside us, because our city planners are doing a marvelous job of measuring concurrency to make services available. But it is driven largely by affordable housing in the first place. And so we want to make this a wonderful blend. We look at Lakeland a lot like Greenville sometimes when we're looking at our growth plans. And Greenville's big mistake was that they didn't put housing widely available around the community, and they ended up pocketing their affordable housing, workforce housing in one area, and that's not healthy for the city or the residents.
I see Dr. Reddout chomping at the bit, so I would like to pass the microphone to her. We are, in fact, seeing a lot of construction going on in our city, a lot of housing. Are you hopeful, Dr. Reddout, that this will, in some ways, in some parts, address the situation that we're facing? Basically, will the housing be affordable enough to meet the needs of those most vulnerable?
The short answer is no. Everything trickles down, and that's unfortunate. And the people that are down the hill are the poorest and most vulnerable. So absolutely not. I don't think that over time we will see the success we would desire for affordable housing for our poorest. The other thing that concerns me, and I've talked to several people about this is that the way tax credits and deals are constructed for affordable housing with developers, over a certain period of time, if they use the housing for, let's say, 10, 15 years, they set aside 10 apartments, 25 apartments, whatever it is, 10% of what they build as affordable housing. What happens at the end of that 10 or 15 years? Do we lose those apartments for the folks who can't afford market rate? And I think I get concerned that that's a trap, quite frankly, that we're looking at the needs of now, but not trying to legislate for 20 years down the road. Things aren't going down, prices aren't going down, prices are going up. And I don't know how you solve for the future for folks who are at the lowest rung of the economic ladder.
We could continue with that portion of the conversation, but I'm going to take, Megan, I'm going to come to you because one of the things you said when you spoke earlier is that there's a tremendous misconception about why people are homeless or why they are where they are. If we continue at the level, even with the lofty goals and ideals that the mayor presented, but if we continue at the level and housing continue to be, or affordable housing at any rate, continues to be out of the reach of the average citizen, how are you going to amend the conversation that you have with individuals or with groups when you speak with them? Because I foresee that you might have to keep having this conversation about why there are so many homeless people, and what are some of the things you might be prepared to say or you think that you need to say as we move forward.
I think that we will continue to have conversations until this issue is one day resolved. I know it is hard to be that optimistic, but as I mentioned, in the nonprofit sector, we have to be. All issues are solvable when you work in this field, even if you don't think you'll be around to see that. I think what the mayor presented could solve a portion of the problem for our working homeless. There are people working 40 hours a week experiencing homelessness. So the version of affordable housing that could bring could potentially help with that issue. That does not necessarily account for people with severe and persistent mental illness, people who are being underpaid. So I think that the conversation, as I do prevention work, needs to be an understanding that it's not just about a nonprofit providing services, it's about legislation ensuring that landlords are not taking advantage. It's about legislation ensuring that we pay our people a livable wage, because hardly anybody in this community does make a livable wage. And yes, Lakeland is cheaper than Orlando or Tampa. We are also making less money. So comparably, we are one of the more expensive places you can currently live in Florida. It's because we're so fast growing, it's because we have great culture. Those are not things that people experiencing homelessness can take advantage of. They're too worried about where they're gonna spend the night. So I think the conversations need to be more expansive and more honest about what this issue really is, because it's not all on the people experiencing homelessness. It's on our legislators, it's on us who are claiming to do this work, and it's on citizens who themselves are not experiencing homelessness but need to be voting as if their loved ones are. And as we continue to and as you mentioned, we cannot have temporary solutions because this is not something that can stick for 10 to 15 years of 10% of apartments being affordable.
Can you tell she's very passionate about this issue? Erica, thank you so very Megan, thank you so very much. Barbara, I'm going to come to you in a little minute here, so I'd like you to share your story. She says, I'd like you to share your story, but Bridget, I want to come back to you. And the question I would like to ask you, especially what Megan just shared, she said it's going to take everyone having honest conversations. And so the question is, Is there sufficient coordination between agencies working to address the issue of homelessness?
I don't know if I can really follow up with what she said. That was really good. Actually, I'm going to say our CLC, I've only been in this position for 5 months now, and I'm going to say our CLC, we are a group, a network of public services that collaborate on a monthly basis. Either it's a COC meeting and or a peer-to-peer group that we are looking to each other for information to solve situations that we're having. We can't find housing for this person, we're collaborating. So I think we're doing well with our agencies, but to follow up with what is really going on with the affordable housing in the units, we have to be raw, we have to be honest. We can build it, that are gonna come, but how are we gonna sustain the housing for the individuals that are gonna be placed into these apartments? One of the things that we actually have done, and the Homeless Coalition has signed an MOU with the Lakeland Housing Authority for the emergency housing vouchers. And so this will actually help the individuals that are on our list that aren't receiving any money move into that apartment that's $800 a month. And then they can have wraparound services that are going to actually be provided. I'm looking right at PJ right now. He's one of our developers, and it's Swan Lake, that actually have services on site for individuals. Now it's mixed income, there's mixed income individuals that are going to be living there, but there's going to be wraparound services for the individuals. Housing individuals is just a small little fraction. Now that's my job. All we want to do is end homelessness. However, we have to come back to full circle on how are we going to have those people sustain the housing that we're providing. And it's things like this to educate everyone, because each and every one of you can go ahead and help us, like we're doing today, give us ideas of what more we can do, and can do anything better. So I think with the emergency housing vouchers, that will help the individuals that are currently on our list to receive the housing. But we also have to find out how we're going to help the actual workers to 40 hours a week sustain their housing.
Thank you so very much. And it is clear, Mary, that you're going to have to host a second such meeting. We're going to be hearing from the audience in a little bit, because, as you said, you'd like to hear what each person, well, maybe not each person, but
why not? Everybody has to listen.
You'd like to hear some responses from the audience. Before we get to the audience questions, Barbara, we promised that we would have you share your story, so I think we'd like you to just go ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, Barbara.
I found myself in an abusive relationship back in 2018. I was living in Pennsylvania, right down here to Polk. Ended up at Talbot House for about 4 months. They had me provided me a place to stay. Found a job, lost the job, found a house, lost the house. I am now living in Gospel Village with Ryan. And I'm working at the Homeless Coalition during the week, and I work for Brenda on the weekend. And this is my passion, is to put back and give back to the people that have given to me over the last 4 years. It's just wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I paid her to tell me that she works for us. I just want to go ahead and say thank you for both of you. I have to say something to this woman right here. She gets up earlier than I even get up to take a bus to come down to our little housing, our homeless coalition. She, no disrespect to my other employees here, she's the most reliable person. That Citrus connection is really on time because she is on there every day, rain or shine. However, if it is raining, we will go back. Thank you.
Thank you so very, very much. We said we would share some questions that came in as we listened to our panelists tonight, and our community engagement director, Trinity Lorena, has some questions there that she would like to pose.
Yeah, so one of the things we did is we sent out a survey that lots of you actually filled out. So we've got a couple of questions, but we are also open to the audience, so just raise your hand and I will come over and find you if you have some questions. But I'm going to start with one that was submitted via the survey, and it asked, it was my understanding that the city of Lakeland intended on hiring several individuals to assess and catalog the current homeless residents on our streets, with the express objective of better serving them. 1, has that happened? 2, what future plans does Lakeland have for affordable housing? Talked about that one.
We did, and we did it for 2 years, and they were wonderfully folded into existing not-for-profits which is where they belong, so that we could turn around and use those case managers to be able to continue to help equip people going forward. It was and it has been very effective. We helped get over 180 people into housing during that period of time. I do want to use this as a slight modification moment to talk about percentages of apartments. We don't do 10% apartments. We do 25 to 35% apartments where we do affordable housing. We also do 100% affordable housing. Units of 82 and 85, and we have many of them going on. Midtown Boston is a great example of that. And so part of who has been able to be placed in those are the people that those case managers have helped work. The wonderful thing about having that case manager work is that we cut through people who really aren't looking for solutions and find the people who are. So we're always trying to create the episodic issues and get them into housing as quickly as possible. And you have to have feet on the street to be able to do that. We've been light on the law enforcement side with respect to some of the things that we can do, particularly in downtown, and that's a staffing issue to some degree, as we are taking a look for budgeting this next year on additional law enforcement people that will give us the ability to have more of that downtown. And that isn't just to try and make life difficult for those people, it's really trying to help understand what their needs are and help them get located. On the veterans side, we work extremely hard at trying to help get all veterans into housing, and we want to continue to do that. There's 80-some communities in the United States now that are absolutely kind of 100% veterans are found in housing. It's done. We'd like to be on that list as we go forward. And so many times, the veterans just don't know where to go. They don't have the pieces to get locked in. If we can do that, we just have to have time with them.
Thank you. All right, we have some questions from the audience.
My question is more along the lines of jobs for our people who are experiencing homeless. I work with the job that I do. I help them get into housing. Mostly it's independent living where they share a house with somebody else. One of the problems that I run into, because I'm a social worker, this is what I do, major problems that I run into is getting their IDs, because Social Security is very useful.
That's how the tax system works, right?
Right. Okay, so, but at the same time, when it comes to jobs, what are we doing? I've only been here for 2 years, so in Lakeland, moved here because of the homeless population, the work that I do. And it was part of one of those things that I see that I go, this is what we're missing is work, because I have clients that want work. They want desperately work.
One of the biggest restrictions for jobs is transit. And that's why Citrus Connection is such an important issue to us. So every time we're working on anything, where's the Citrus Connection spot to go there? And the biggest need I hear from all our employers is they need employees. So we need to do a better job of linking that together, because we have jobs. We just need to do that. Right. Good. Love to be able to talk more about that.
Hi, my name's Katie. One of the things that I hear from people that I meet, my neighbors and things like that, is either that they're on fixed income, so they cannot afford these market rates for these apartments and homes, or they are facing like their housing, they got evicted. and once you are evicted, it's really hard to get another apartment, which can lead to homelessness. And so my question for the mayor and for the other organizations here, do you support or plan to support tenant protections, things that are like right to counsel if you're facing an eviction, or capping rent increases so that they don't outpace cost of living and things like that?
One of our goals this year is to support programs particularly for people who are renting and can't afford to leave that unit because it has mold and it has unlivable conditions in it, and to create not only an increased level of ordinance, this is Brian started our discussion on this, but not only to increase that level of ordinances with respect to what is expected, but fining for people who won't make those changes as landlords, so that it becomes much more punitive for them to be able to consider doing that. We heard some stories the other night at the peace meeting, which talked about the landlords with 4 kids that had deplorable conditions and they just raised the rent. They didn't do anything to remedy it. We can't live with that, so that's part of what we need to do. The other thing is that legislatively, we recently increased the amount of money that we are giving for down payments, and to $3,000. We also increased the amount of payment assistance to $10,000 in this area district for homes that can be purchased. We've done a lot of infill opportunities for people to do that. But if you're renting and you're in a deplorable condition, and you know that there's not a marketplace to be able to move, and your landlord doesn't give a rip because all they want to do is take the money for being able to get the rent from you without repairing anything in the process, we don't have a good system today to be able to make those landlords accountable, and that's inexcusable. So that is our priority first.
So I just want to go ahead and chime in a moment here. What HCPC has actually started in July, we are hosting another event, and it's a landlord engagement. And so what we're going to need, we're trying to find the landlords that are willing to write to the individuals that have the barriers, the evictions, the criminal record. Because as a landlord myself, the first thing you do, you give a background. You go and say, oh, he's a felon, oh, no, criminal. Next, $65 later, you get another application fee. So we're actually trying to build our portfolios of landlords that are willing to rent to or individuals that have such big barriers. And one of the biggest barriers are eviction, and how do you get the eviction off? Well, there are funds available. We haven't found them yet, but we are sniffing them out with landlord mitigation. And it's a wonderful thing because, when so many landlords have been burdened by renters, they don't want to rent to. They don't even want to rent to Section 8 voucher people. So with this mitigation fund, then we can actually help the landlord say, it's like an incentive. Like, look, we'll go in and do repairs to the household that was destroyed or whatnot. And it's a process. We're starting it, but it's a great question. We're starting to talk about it because living now, we have to look out into the future. What's going to be best for the future? We have to get our pool of landlords willing to rent to our guests.
We're going to take maybe 2 more questions. Yes, so this lady right here and the gentleman back there, and then we will probably bring this part of the program to a close.
Does Lakeland have any kind of information portal or triage or homeless navigator, kind of like a welcome desk at the Chamber of Commerce, where you can say, this is who I am, this is what my situation is, and access or understand that there are no resources, or these are the resources you need to contact, because access is so confusing once you get into the bureaucracy, and most of those people don't have internet access to cell phones. And I was wondering if you all are trying to coordinate the nonprofits amongst yourselves, but is there a disconnect in serving the community because of information?
Well, I'm going to also ask Bridget to chime in on this, but yes, we have coordinated entry through the Homeless Coalition, where someone is at risk of homelessness or is homeless, They can start there to find housing. We also have United Way, Scott, wherever Scott is, I'm doing a plug for the United Way, 211, that can help you access services as well. You know, and I think it's sort of a myth that people don't have cell phones.
I was just gonna say that.
You know, our experience is that our folks who come to Talbot House for Service, the majority of them have cell phones. Now they may have spotty service where it's off 1 month and, you know, it takes 3 months to get it back on, but there are resources, particularly through the Homeless Coalition, where you can learn about what resources are available in the community. Well, let me just make one last point. When I talked about 10% set aside for the poor in terms of housing, I'm looking at a county-wide focus. You know, Lakeland, and I've worked with Bill a lot over the years. We do love each other. I think I made him mad, but it's a pretty good record. But when I look at homelessness, I'm looking at this entire county. And Lakeland city commissioners and the mayor have had the will to invest. And the other cities have been very slow in their response to homelessness. So when I talk about 20 years down the road and 500,000 people just in Lakeland, is that what you said? Which means probably close to 1 million people in this county, or more. We have to face facts that it can't just be a Lakeland solution. It has to be a countywide solution.
Okay.
So I would like to acknowledge, because the lady back there was talking about the system, and I would like to acknowledge a couple of people that I know personally that are here representing the United Way of Central Florida. I'd like to acknowledge June May, who is sitting back there and will be able to tell you a lot about that 211 system for assistance. So June, put your hands up, please. And I'd also like to acknowledge Stacy Walsh, who's sitting here with the United Way of Central Florida. So maybe before you get out of the room tonight, ma'am, you might see one of these two people. And I have just put them on the spot. I don't know, probably don't have a job tomorrow, but that's
before we take our one last question, I wanted just to say this is not the end of the program. This is just the end of this program. This part of the program, there will be refreshments just outside the door. Get some coffee, get some scones, and then we're going to have breakout sessions in here for everybody who is live and in person tonight, so you can talk directly with the organizations who help put this on. I also want to say for anyone who is watching on Facebook right now, we will have a better video posted a little later today. We are recording on 4 cameras right now. The live stream feed did not quite work as well as we had hoped. But we'll get a better video later. All right, well, so without further ado, our last question.
So it's a follow-up on this question. You addressed some of the protections for the renters. Given that rents are tripling and quadrupling so much faster than wage, when are we going to open up the dialogue about rent control? Because you can't legislate the morality of greed. You've got to legally legislate through the acts and the will of the people in this room and the people in your office. So the specific question is there a dialogue at this moment about rent control here in this city and in this county?
Not to my knowledge.
Would you not like to say that on the mic, sir?
Not to my knowledge.
There we are. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your patience tonight, and thank you, audience members, both in-house and online, for the questions that you posed. As we mentioned, we're just closing up this portion of the program. It has been my honor to be your moderator for this evening. Can you put your hands together for our panelists? And then we'll be back with some other discussions in a more informal setting.